Hello and welcome to this video on positive and normative economics. On the screen we have 6 statements here, 6 statements about economics. What I'd like you to do in a second is pause the video and see if you can come up with 2 groups that these 6 statements could fall into. Can you categorize these statements into 2 broad groups? So pause the video, and when you think you've got your answer, click to continue. Well, let's look at these statements. 1, 3 and 5 all have something in common. A rise in consumer incomes will lead to a rise in the demand for new cars. More competition in markets can lead to lower prices for consumers. These are statements that we can objectively measure. We can look at these statements and we can test whether they're actually true or not in reality. We can measure consumer incomes and we can measure how many new cars are being sold, so we can objectively with facts prove whether this statement is true or false. We can measure the number of firms in markets, the amount of competition in the market, and we can measure prices for consumers. So again, for this statement here, we can measure whether that's true or false by looking at facts or figures. So we would call these objective statements. They can be proven true or false. Now let's look at these other statements. The level of duty on petrol is too unfair and unfairly penalises motorists. The government should increase the national minimum wage to £6 per hour in order to reduce relative poverty. Well, these statements are very difficult to prove whether they're true or false. We would describe these as being value judgments. They're not statements we can prove as being true or false, but they involve some form of opinion. The level of duty on petrol is too unfair. How can we prove whether something is unfair or not? So we can't prove this with facts. The government should increase the national minimum wage. Well, how can we prove whether they should or shouldn't? Again, this is based on opinion, a value judgment. And in economics, we distinguish between these two. We distinguish between objective statements and value judgments. And we're going to have a look at that now. Statements that can be proven using evidence and backed up we call positive statements or positive statements about economics. Statements that contain some form of opinion or value judgment we call normative statements. And these are both important definitions. So can we make sure we have positive statements down as a definition, and can we also make sure we have normative statements down? So positive can be proven by facts or data. The key part of a normative statement is that it includes some form of value judgment, and this is an important term to use, value judgment, if we're going to pick up the marks in the exam. So there we go. What we would say is that 1, 3 and 5 are all positive or objective statements, whereas 2, 4 and 6 we would say are all value judgments or examples of normative statements. That's it. Thanks very much for listening.